Pastime narrative sequence. Let us now look a little more closely at this pastime narrative sequence. What we're talking about here is the preterite plus the vav consecutive on this top line here. And what can happen is we will start our sequence with a perfect. Okay, that's this one over here. So it puts it in the past. And then we'll have a vav consecutive with a preterite. Then we'll have some other words. Then another vav consecutive and a preterite. And another one, etc. Now I'm just highlighting the verbs here, not all the words that are in between. But the sequence here will start with the perfect, and then you'll have it carried forward by the preterite plus the vav consecutive. 1, 2, 3. And you can change subject. You can have Joshua said something, and the children of Israel said something, and someone else did something, whatever. Your sequence still moves forward, even though your subject is changing. So this is your basic storytelling tense. If you open the Bible to a book like the book of Joshua, where you have lots of stories, lots of narratives, you'll find that this tense is used an awful lot. Now, although it can start with perfect, in actual fact, many times it doesn't. Let me just switch this here. Many times you'll simply have a sequence that starts right off with the vav consecutive plus the preterite. And you still translate it the same way. Even though it doesn't start with a perfect, you'd still translate this as your basic past tense for telling your story, your narrative. And sometimes you'll even have them in isolation, just all by themselves. And you'd still translate the same way as you would here. So you don't always have a long chain, a long sequence, and you don't always start with a perfect. But this preterite plus vav consecutive is your basic storytelling tense. Okay, let's look at a few examples here. Here we have an example where it actually does start with a perfect. Shama Adonai Otam Vayizkor Berito. The Lord heard them and remembered his covenant. Okay? So Shema here, this is perfect. And this one here is preterite. See, if you look at it, you'll see preterite plus vav conversive. This looks like a imperfect, right? You got zachar and you've got, so your root is here. This is your prefix. You've got your dagesh and your vav and your patach from the vav conversive. So we have a preterite plus vav conversive here, or vav consecutive. I may switch back and forth between using different names for this, just because I've used different names at different times. So forgive me if I do, but what I'm talking about here is the vav consecutive. I'll try to use that because that's what Ross uses. Okay. So the Lord heard them and remembered his covenant. The sequence here starts with a perfect, past tense, and then it is continued with this preterite. Now we could have other preterites, vav consecutive plus preterites, continuing on here. We would not continue on this sequence with just perfects. Perfect, and then perfect, and then perfect. So that's just how Hebrew works. You start with one verb, but then you carry it on with a different one, even though you translate them both the same way. Now, you can break this chain. I shouldn't call it a chain. You can break this sequence. Something like lo, the negator lo can break it. Here's an example. Halach vayilkod oto velo shavat. Okay? Halach means to walk or to go. So he went. This is a perfect, 3ms. He went. Lachad means to capture. And he captured it. Remember, this is our 3fs ending with the mapik there, the feminine period. So it probably refers to a city. He went and captured it. Velo shavat. Shavat means to stop or to cease. So he went and captured it and did not stop, did not cease, did not rest. This is the perfect. This is our preterite plus vav consecutive. And this here is our perfect, is another perfect. Why did we not carry this chain on with a preterite plus vav consecutive? The reason is because this low broke the sequence. So this tells us something. Perfect, vav consecutive plus preterite, or preterite plus vav consecutive, and then if we break the chain, it reverts back to perfect. But we translate these all the same way, right? He went, he captured, he did not cease. So what this tells us is that there's a very close connection between the usage of the preterite and the perfect. They're basically the same thing. The only difference is that the preterite is the one, the preterite plus vav consecutive, is the one that will carry the sequence forward. We translate them the same, but this is the one that they use when they want to build up the backbone of their narrative. If something breaks it, then you go back to the perfect, and then you would continue again with these preterites plus vav consecutives. Now, other things can break sequences as well, and we'll look at that in much more detail, or a little bit more detail anyway, in chapter 21. But if you have a narrative sequence running along, you can get these breaks to supply things like background information or circumstantial information, other things that are necessary for the reader to know about the narrative, but they aren't really part of the story itself. Various types of asides, flashbacks, contrasts, or sometimes the start of a new narrative section, a new paragraph or a new section. So if you have your Hebrew text running along, okay, it's going along like this or whatever, and you have these preterite vav consecutive sequences that are running over multiple clauses and sentences, and then you get a little break, and it tells you something. And then you get some more vav consecutives, preterites plus vav consecutives, and you get another little break. And sometimes the breaks will be there because you have a new section. Other times the breaks will be there because there's some other information. And this is useful to know, because if you just translate this into English, he went, he captured it, and did not stop. Now here we don't really have new information, but other types of things can come in here with new information. If we're not paying attention, we may just translate it and not really realize that we're now talking about something that is somewhat tangential to the main storyline. So as you read more Hebrew and your vocabulary develops and you read longer texts and things, it's useful to pay attention to what form of verb is being used. And when you see a break, then take a look at it and say, okay, what's going on here? Why is this happening? It can often help you understand the story better if you're paying that kind of close attention. And your verb change will clue you in that something has changed, something is different. Okay, the last thing I want to say, I'll show two more examples here, is that you don't always want to translate the vav conversive as and. If you read older translations of the Hebrew Bible, you'll often see a whole pile of ands, especially in the narrative section. And this, and this, and this, and this. And all they're doing is they're rather slavishly translating the vavs as and. It's not necessary, it doesn't produce good English, and actually you miss kind of what the story is saying, or at least you miss a little bit of it. It's not as good a translation. Here is a sentence. We'll read this here. Vayomer Yehoshua el Bnei Yisrael. Vayomer, this is actually an irregular form, Amar, but it's probably the most common preterite plus vav consecutive in the Bible. It simply means he said, and it shows up throughout. It's just everywhere. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, God said to Moses, saying, whatever. Here it's Joshua speaking. Joshua said to the children of Israel. Now, if this starts a new sentence, and it doesn't make sense in English to put an and here, and Joshua said, then don't translate it. It's quite alright to not translate the Vav consecutive. Just leave it blank and just leave it off. So Joshua said to the children of Israel. You don't always need to start with and. So sometimes you don't want to translate at all. Other times, and this is the last example now, other times you want to translate it in such a way that emphasizes that there is a logical connection between the clauses. Let's read this one. Vayilkod oto, vayesrof oto. Now, lachad means to capture, saraf means to burn. So you could translate this, and he captured it, and he burned it. And if he did a bunch of other things, and he did this, and he did this, and he did that, it's going to get rather annoying to read that in English. But in this case here, you could translate it a different way. You could say when he captured it, then he burned it. Or maybe for better English, just when he captured it, he burned it. And what you're doing if you translate it that way is you're showing that this clause is really logically connected to this. It's also chronologically connected. You can't burn it until you capture it, but it's also logically connected. He burnt it. He captured it, and it was after he captured it that in fact he burned it. And this is a legitimate way to translate. In fact, it's probably a better way. Sometimes first-year students, they learn their vocabulary, they learn the 3 or 4 words or 1 word or whatever that is the definition for them to memorize. Vav means and or something. And then they stick to that, and if someone tells them, okay, I'm going to read this when, say, no, you can't do that, because Vav doesn't mean when, Vav means and. You need to get beyond that and recognize that what you memorize in your vocabulary list is just a beginning. And here what I'm showing you is that even though there's no adverb that says when here, this is probably a better way to translate it. When he captured it, he burned it. Now this will be context dependent. You need to look at the greater context and see what makes sense. But don't always translate your Vav consecutives or your Vav conjunctives for that matter as simply and. Okay, so that's our pastime narrative sequence. I've shown you some examples here. Basically, your preterite plus Vav conversive or Vav consecutive is the tense that you use to carry your story forward. And other things can break it, and when it does, it'll generally go back to the perfect again until you're finished with that aside or whatever, and it'll come back to your preterite plus Vav consecutive, the pastime narrative sequence.